Hey everyone. Before we get started, I had some technical difficulties at the beginning of this video. My new boom arm I got for my camera adjusted itself after I set up the shot, and you can't see like this whole upper half of Chihuahua State. So let me show you real quick what you couldn't see at the beginning of this video. So when I point it out, you'll already know what it looks like. Here's Chihuahua State. This is the Rio Bravo del Norte along here, making up the border with Texas and New Mexico, but not quite Arizona. And this is Ciudad Juárez, the largest city in Chihuahua State. You can see the Chihuahuan Desert coming down through here. Everything else should be in frame. So let's get started with the video now that you know what it looks like. And I will realize halfway through and adjust it for you, so don't worry. Enjoy the video. Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Chihuahua in Mexico. Chihuahua is located in northern Mexico. It borders the United States in the forms of the state of Texas and New Mexico. It almost borders Arizona, but it doesn't quite make it, does it? Along the border here with Texas is the Rio Bravo del Norte, or as it's known in the United States, the Rio Grande. Depending on where you are in the world, that's what that river is called. And that is part of the dividing line between Mexico and the United States. And along that border, we can find the largest city in the state, Ciudad, Juárez, which we'll talk a lot about during history. Chihuahua is also the largest state in Mexico, and it has a lot of very diverse geography, which was a surprise to me when I first started researching, because when I think of Chihuahua, I think of the Chihuahuan Desert, which is a very dry, very rocky, at some places very sandy desert. But that is only a portion of the state. There's this whole portion over here that you can see is incredibly mountainous and full of rivers. This is part of the Sierra Madre Occidental, part of the Sierra Madre Mountains. And these peaks are very big and beautiful. And these rivers you can see crisscrossing throughout create some beautiful waterfalls and some beautiful canyons. The most famous being right here. That is Copper Canyon. It is actually larger and deeper than the Grand Canyon, and it's nicknamed Mexico's Grand Canyon. It's really beautiful. I can't wait to show you on Google Earth. In the central part of the state, we can find the capital city of Chihuahua right there. And I think actually that's it for geography. You can see that it borders Sonora. It borders Sinaloa. It borders Durango, which I didn't write in my notes, but this used to be all one big state. And I believe at Mexican independence, they divided it in two. And it also borders Coahuila, which we'll talk about in a couple weeks. But yeah, it is a very big, beautiful state with a lot of interesting history. A lot of history, actually. So I'm going to summarize this history for you. I'm not going to go into extreme details. If I did, we would be here for a very long time. And there's a lot of things on Google Earth I want to show you here. So we're going to abbreviate it. But we're going to start off with Chihuahua's UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is located up here near Nuevo Casas Grandes, here in the town of Casas Grandes. Let me get my tablet. Come on over. My goodness, I almost knocked over a bunch of stuff and it would have been so loud. Okay, here we go. This is the archaeological zone of Paquimé, and Casas Grandes. And it's perfect because this is where our history starts as well. Paquimé, Casas Grandes, which reached its apogee in the 14th and 15th centuries, played a key role in trade and cultural contacts between the Pueblo culture of the southwestern United States and northern Mexico and the more advanced civilizations of Mesoamerica. The extensive remains, only part of which have been excavated, are clear evidence of the vitality of a culture which was perfectly adapted to its physical and economic environment, but which suddenly vanished at the time of the Spanish conquest. There's some great pictures on Google Earth and not so great pictures here on UNESCO, but I think this is the best one that really just shows what this place is like. It is a huge maze of what used to be big houses, Casas Grandes, right? But we'll look more at that on Google Earth. So yes, the story of Chihuahua definitely begins with its indigenous populations. The first people would have settled here sometime between the years 12,000 BCE and 7,000 BCE, slowly but surely beginning to incorporate farming into their cultures and lifestyles. Casas Grandes was built by the Mogollon culture, which, like it said, was part of the Puebla peoples that lived throughout northern Mexico and the southern United States. Paquimé was built sometime between 1130 and 1350. It was abandoned around the year 1450, just before the Spanish arrived. And it's one of those places, like throughout Central America, that we don't quite know why it was abandoned. It could have been multiple factors like overpopulation, which brings things like diseases and conflicts. It could have been a shortage of water or food. It could have been a drought or a famine. We don't know. Like it said, it's still being excavated. Isn't that neat? There's still lots to learn. The Spanish would have arrived in this area in the year 1528, fresh off conquering the Aztecs. The indigenous people here did not take too kindly to the Spanish arriving, and there was a very large resistance movement. At that time, there were around 200 different indigenous groups living in what's now Chihuahua State, the largest being the Tarahuma, which lived in the mountains here. There were also the Guajiro, the Apache, and the Comanche. And definitely the Tarahuma and Apache were big headaches, but I think a lot of them gave the Spanish some big headaches, which is annoying for the Spanish because they were set on mining around here, especially silver mining, which here at Parral is a very, very big silver mine. But there are lots of other mines throughout, mostly around this area here. Slowly but surely, towns would be established. In 1659, El Paso del Norte was founded, halfway between Santa Fe and, I guess, Mexico City. It's not quite halfway, but it's along the way, isn't it? It's a stopover place. In 1709, Chihuahua was founded, another halfway point between the mines and El Paso del Norte. Very famous event happened here in Chihuahua in the year 1811. A pastor by the name of Padre Hidalgo was not in this state. He was down in Dolores, where he declared that Mexico should declare independence from Spain, known as the Grito de Dolores. He would be eventually captured, tried for treason here in Chihuahua, and he would be executed. Father Hidalgo is one of the most, maybe even like the most, at least top 3 most important figures in Mexican independence. September 16th, the day of the Grito de Dolores, is Mexico's national holiday. Their 4th of July, their Bastille Day, their big day to celebrate their independence and their sovereignty. So extremely important figure, and sadly, he was executed here in Chihuahua. course, Mexico would gain its independence from Spain, become its own country. Things were very rough and tough in Chihuahua and throughout Mexico as the country figured itself out politically in terms of political parties. They disagreed quite violently. A lot of violent outbreaks happened here in Chihuahua. Not to mention the indigenous population was still resisting. And now instead of fighting the Spanish, they were fighting the Mexicans. But a whole different type of war would break out in the 1840s, the Mexican-American War. Because all this up here was not part of the United States. Texas declared its independence, and I think about 10 years after that, decided to join the United States. Mexico said, enough is enough, we are taking back our land. Mexican-American War breaks out. Mexico had the upper hand until the Battle of the Alamo. The U.S. went kind of hard against Mexico after that and invaded Chihuahua and wound up occupying the city of Chihuahua in 1847, holding on to it for the rest of the conflict until the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was drawn up and the border between Mexico and the United States was established, cut off right here at the river. I guess following latitude there, because remember, Mother Nature doesn't make straight lines. Oh my gosh, can you see New Mexico? I hope so. My goodness, I was pointing it out and you couldn't even see. You have to, there we go. I'm so sorry. You probably couldn't see Ciudad Juárez. Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I did not notice. I think my camera adjusted right before I started filming. All right, so Ciudad Juárez, I'm so sorry. Ciudad Juárez is up here. There's the river. There's New Mexico. My goodness, I'm glad I caught that. Because our next events happen up here. Like I said, Mexico was still struggling to identify itself. And the Europeans over there decided to help out. And France took over Mexico. The president at that time was Benito Juárez, the first indigenous president of Mexico. He wound up running his government in exile up here. And held on to that area, which I believe was his hometown. If I'm not, I didn't double check that. Anyway, I think he was from this area. But from 1865 to 1866, this was his base of operations here. So after they defeated the French and he became a very beloved figure, in 1888, they renamed the city to Juárez City, Ciudad Juárez. It's still called that today. Now, things are about to get even more conflicted in terms of how Mexico is going to run itself. The Porfiriato, which was a very overbearing time of Mexico in terms of its government control over the people, had ended, and Mexico was once again figuring itself out, and revolutions began to break out. And in 1910, the Mexican Revolution was on. Various rebel leaders took over sections of Mexico. This area was very famously pretty much ran by Pancho Villa, making it his base here in Chihuahua, where he lived. Technically, the Mexican Revolution would go on until 1920, but by then I believe all of the actual conflict had died down. But that wouldn't be the end of conflicts here in Chihuahua. Up here in Ciudad Juárez, on the border with the United States, there was an area along the river that would change course every so often, known as the Chamizal. And it became debatable which part belonged to Mexico, which part belonged to the United States. It became a whole border conflict because Mexico refused to let it go, even though there were Americans living in that area with their homes and lives and everything. I think you can see right there, Chamizal National Memorial is pointed right up there. Perfect. So instead of going into a whole-out war, which I think would have happened like 100 years prior, the US and Mexico figured it out, and in 1967, the Chamizal area was officially given back to Mexico. It still is part of Mexico today. Like it says here, there's a lot of memorials and parks in that area today. And of course, we'll look at them on Google Earth. Ciudad Juárez became a big center for maquiladoras, which are essentially big factories that are ran by American companies. But because they are just over the border in another country, they can pay the workers a lot less because a lot of rules don't apply, right? So it's sort of a win-win in that many people get employed, the companies get their products at a bargain. But is it really a win when people are being exploited, you know? They should be being paid a lot more. But there are a lot more nefarious things that have been happening here in Ciudad Juárez, mainly to keep it YouTube friendly. Certain items heading across the borders that you put into your body that are bad for you or go pew pew. Things like that being smuggled across, not to mention a lot of people being smuggled across as well, whether willingly or unwillingly, if you know what I mean. From what I've read, the substances trafficking has really quieted down and is more underground. It's not as in your face, out in the open, violence, all of that kind of thing. But it's still prevalent. And of course, there is a lot of border crossing today, even though this area is very heavily patrolled, mainly by the American border patrols here. There's the big fence, they've got checkpoints, things like that, but a lot of people still cross over illegally into the United States at this point. And that's essentially where we are today. In a nutshell, I could have gone way more into Pancho Villa and the Mexican Revolution, but I would rather show you some neat places on Google Earth. So with that being said, why don't I dim the lights and grab my tablet and we'll explore Chihuahua State on Google Earth. Let's go. Here we are in Chihuahua, which I forgot to mention the obvious. The dogs. Obviously, the dogs are named after this part of the world. Apparently, they used to roam around the Chihuahuan desert. And according to Hernan Cortez, the Aztecs would breed them to eat them. I can't imagine them being very tasty. They're so little. Let's zoom out so you can see exactly where we are in the world. Here is beautiful Mexico, part of North America, bordering the United States, as well as Belize and Guatemala, which we'll be going to in a few days. There's big old Chihuahua State up here, and you can very clearly see the difference between the desert, the mountains, and the forests. It's so beautiful. So let's go north and make our way south, starting up here in Ciudad Juárez. Now, are you wondering what in the world did you see in the intro? Let's go find out. Up here we have the Chamizal. So this is the region I was telling you about, that they weren't quite sure would be part of Mexico, part of the United States, because the river, you can see over here, would change course every so often. I don't think it's going to be changing course anytime soon because of all of this infrastructure around. And you can see the beautiful park. Over here's a memorial to Benito Juárez. There it is. Bum, 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 bum. Big memorials there. But what you saw in the intro was this big old X over here. And look at it in 3D. It's so big. It's massive. So I was looking up what in the world this is, because you can see it is an X, but there's some artistic changes to it, right? So it is actually a Mayan symbol, I believe. One of the letters of their alphabet, I think. Big festivals. Look how big it is. It's so big. I don't know. To me, I feel like, the letter X. There's only 2 countries in the world that have the letter X in their name. One of them is Mexico. But it also represents the crossing of cultures between the indigenous and the Spanish, creating Mexican culture here in the middle, which is a nice symbol, isn't it? Looks like they have big carnivals over here. Anyway, that is the monument to the Mexican people. As you can see, El Paso, Texas is just over here. One thing I didn't mention was that the border crossing was pretty lenient until about the 1930s. People would hop over all the time until it became much more strict because things were coming through that were not good for people. So you can see here a big road, and I believe there's the checkpoint there, but this one over here is definitely like the main one. You can see the customs over there. Look how packed it was the day they took this photo. They were backed up by a lot. Look at all the cars backed up. Look at, they don't come out in 3D very well, but these are all little cars trying to cross the border there. What a headache to sit in. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I think that was all really the main things I wanted to show you here. I feel like those are the most important. There's, of course, the various old cathedrals and things, but I think looking at the other monuments are pretty cool. And as always, I highly encourage you to explore these areas on your own. You can see the city is so big. So big. It's pretty huge. You can see all the factories here, the maquiladoras. Feel free to explore this area on your own. You're going to want to because there's so much to see. Let's look at the desert here. Big sprawling desert. Here's a park area here. This is the sandy area. Some mountains. Looks like they're sand surfing on someone. There's lots of beautiful indigenous rock art out here as well. Yeah, it's pretty much, when you think of like Mexican desert, it's either this or cacti, right? Like barren, dry. There's some cacti. Beautiful. It's pretty stereotypical, isn't it? Of like when you think desert in Mexico. Let's look at Casas Grandes, which is over here. There's Nuevo Casas Grandes. And let's find original Casas Grandes up here. And we can find the archaeological site. Look at all these pretty farms. Just outside of town. That is not the town. There's nothing there. That's not Casas Grandes. Excuse me, where did it go? It's over here. I found a couple things see, that's not it either. There's a couple things get mistagged in the state I found. Like I was looking up a big waterfall I'm going to show you later, and it was telling me that it was in the middle of a city, and I was like, it definitely is not. And now I have this. Okay, hold the phone. There's Nuevo Casas Grandes. If anything, I could just type it in and it'll pop up, but this is low-key annoying. Here, no, I just looked at that. There's no city there. There's a lot of nothing there. Okay. Let's look up Paquimé. See, it was way off. Holy moly. See, it is not in... This is what I did with the waterfall. It is not here at all. Like, not even close. My goodness. Things are, like, really mistagged. in Chihuahua State. Somebody needs to fix this. Where is it actually? Casa, casa, casa. Lots of mi casa y su casas. But where's the casas grandes? Well, there's Llanos. Okay, well, let's just look at this slideshow then. No, that's no good. That's a terrible slideshow. The official one is much better. All right, 1 second. I'm going to find it. All right, I have returned. It was right next to. It was right next to the city. There's Casas Grandes, and over here is Paquimé. We found it finally. My goodness, that was way too complicated. Can see it from above. This sprawling city, or at least what's left of it. Isn't that gorgeous? Look at all those right angles. Look how well planned this place was. And we haven't even found most of it. Okay, this will be a much better slideshow. It's pretty great. Lots of pottery has been found here. Well, all kinds of treasures. And some kind of bones. Looks like from mammoths or big buffalo. There are lots of buffalo out here. Bison, buffalo. Oops. Okay, don't know what I tapped. Lots of tools, maybe some jewelry as well. Ta-da. Pretty amazing. Let me see. There was a slideshow over here that had buffalo, because there's lots of, maybe it was, I think it's this one. Gorgeous. Yep, look at them. Big buffalo roaming around just as they should be. If you didn't know, many of them were killed by Americans mostly, but I'm sure Mexicans too, deliberately to try to starve out the indigenous population. So they're slowly but surely coming back. All right, let's hope there's no more hiccups. Let's head down to the forest and see some beautiful sights, including a big, beautiful waterfall that I promised you. So, Mexican viewers, is this Basa Seachi? Is that how you say that? It doesn't sound very Mexican. It almost looks Italian, so I wonder. But look, do you see this big canyon here? It looks terrible in 3D, but it looks amazing in photos. Look at this waterfall. And look at the canyon. Yeah, the Copper Canyon system is pretty stunning. Look at this. This is the second biggest waterfall in Mexico too. Can you believe? It's absolutely massive. Look at the view from the top. Look how tiny the trees are. My goodness, it is absolutely stunning. Oop, I'm getting vertigo. No, thank you. It is gorgeous. Beautiful, beautiful waterfall. I think this one has a good, yeah, this is my favorite picture right here. It's almost Yosemite-like, isn't it? Except I don't think Yosemite is this green. It's green, but not this green. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. In terms of Copper Canyon, I don't really like the official slideshow on Google Earth here. I think I have to type it in. Yeah, let me type it in. Copper. Watch it take me to the city. No, okay. Here is Copper Canyon. You can see the river down there. I don't think the 3D does this justice very well either, because it doesn't look very deep in this sense, and that's just because it's so big that the dimensions get lost. It is very wide. Look at that. That's so pretty. It's cable cars taking you across, and there's the little train. You can see the train tracks there. There it goes, the Chepe, which came up in every source that I read about Copper Canyon. So apparently El Chepe is incredibly important to the canyon and the environment here. Lots of cool rocks as well. I would I would not survive that. I would absolutely melt down. I cannot do heights like that. Not at all. But I would appreciate the beauty of this area. So gorgeous. I wonder if I can find, might be this one. I don't think so, but there's some slideshows of some really cool rocks. I don't think it was in this area. But isn't this gorgeous? If I told you, if I asked you, where is this picture from? You would say maybe, that's California, that's Central Europe, maybe even Russia, If I said Mexico, you would not believe me. You would not believe me. You'd be like, no, that's Latvia. Like, nope, that's in Mexico. Not the most stereotypical Mexican landscape that comes to mind when you think Mexico. You think either desert or you think like Mayan jungle. You don't think gorgeous, gorgeous forest like that. Over here is Parral, which I just want to show you the big mine over here. At one point, it was the largest or most, let me phrase that again. This mine produced the most silver at one time, which I thought was Bolivia, but I guess at its height, this was producing the most silver in the whole wide world. But the place I really want to show you is over here in Nica, which I just saw. Here it is, Nica, which was also a mine. And one day in the 2010s, they were exploring through and found this cave that they had just drained of water, and it was full of massive selenite crystals. These are two people, and these are the crystals. The largest crystals ever found, ever. Are there any more pictures of the crystals? Oh, here we go. Yeah, it's a very famous photograph. That's a human. These are the crystals. So, this cave was extremely dangerous to be in. It was incredibly hot and extremely humid, and even with all of this protective gear, people could only be in here for about 20 minutes at a time. And the more it was exposed to people, the faster it was degrading. Pretty much any time you stepped or touched these crystals, they would begin to degrade. It needed to be full of hot water in order to keep growing. So recently they reflooded it, and you cannot access it anymore. Not that you could go in it. Anyway, only researchers could at the time that it was empty. But sadly, you cannot go into the Cave of the Crystals today. It is full of water. You cannot enter. And maybe someday they'll get to drain it again and explore and see what else has grown in that cave. Pretty remarkable. Like, I don't know. I said before in a video in Thailand, like, I don't believe in crystal healing, but I do believe in crystal energy. That place just must be extreme. Like, there's no way that the energy of the earth, like, just, you know what I'm saying. Anyway, moving on. Let's look at Chihuahua. Chihuahua's up here. No, it's not. Yes, it is. It's right there. Up here in the capital city, we want to look at, oh, those are the cool rocks I want to show you. But first, we're going to look at this. This was Pancho Villa's house. Today, it is a museum for the Mexican Revolution. Big, beautiful casa. There's his car. There he is. Francisco Villa or Pancho Villa. There's his wanted posters and his like very cool photos of him being like very tough, very intense. There's his bed. Guess that's his piano room, I guess. Cool paintings. That looks like his death mask, which is a little eerie. Looked like at the Benito Juárez Memorial there was a death mask of him too, which is a little eerie, but I mean, that's what he looked like. These are the cool rocks, right? I think so. At least some of them. Pretty cool rocks. peaks of the moon. Look how gorgeous. Oh my gosh. You think so too. And his happy pup. Look how neat. See, now if I showed you this, you'd be like Scotland, maybe. You know, maybe even like Wales. Oh, this is Mexico. Pretty amazing. And yeah, the stars must be pretty great. You can see Orion up there. Hum, 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 hum. There's lots to show you. Maybe this is the... Yeah, we found the cool rocks, you guys. We found the cool rocks. Look at these cool rocks. Whoa. Talk about, if I showed you this, you'd be like Mars. Obviously too green to be Mars, but those rocks, they look out of this world. They don't look like they're from Earth. They're too beautiful. The shapes are too weird and too amazing. Look at that pretty sunset behind the mountains. It's pretty great. Look at these cool, look at it. This looks man-made. This looks like at Disneyland, the Radiator Springs Racers. That's what it looks like. It looks like that's styrofoam. That's so beautiful. You can see all the farmland over here too. Look at all that. You can like see it from way above. So much farmland. But yeah, there's all kinds of amazing, amazing slideshows throughout this state. I feel like I was looking at Delicias and I saw something really cool. Maybe it was this museum. Oh yeah, all the dinosaur stuff that was here. There's lots of dinosaur stuff. I must have found a lot of fossils in this area because there's like 2 different dinosaur museums in this town. I think this might be one. Yeah, paleontology. So take a look at the dinosaurs. Look at that. Oh, big old T-Rex. Oh. Very cool. Oh, that's a human. Let's get past that. Lots of humans, apparently. And then down here, where did it go? The Chihuahua Desert Museum. The Mudech. Where there's a lot more cute little models of dinosaurs. And humans. And little Spino guys. These guys are so cool. Look at that wingspan, my goodness. They're flying all over the place. Little desert tortoises, cacti, beautiful little flowers, snaky snakes, and dinosaurs. So cool, right? That's pretty neat. There's so many things to explore in the state. I can't stress enough that you should definitely take some time out of your day whenever you're bored to explore this area. Let's look at the forest one more time before we end this video. Let's find some random slideshow here of something beautiful. Look at all the little towns. Let's look at this town. It looks like it's on top of a mountain. Yeah, it's not that exciting. It looks like it's a mining town. Lots of mining stuff happening there. I'd rather find something natural. Did we look at this? Did we look at this? Yeah, that's when we were looking at the trees. I want to find one more. What's this? Poppycochick. Here we go. More cool rocks. I'm into it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. The next video is going to be tablet only, just because there's not a lot of history that's happened there, but we're going to hop over to Malawi and we're going to see this amazing, amazing safari park, national park there, where we might even find the Big Five, the only place in Malawi where the Big Five live, and Malawi's largest elephant population. And you know I'm all about elephants. So be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and let me know all your thoughts down below in the comments. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a good